welcome to another Rig Roundup with me, Ian King. And today we're coming from the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane, which is in London's West End, near Covent Garden, that kind of area. And we're here for Hercules the Musical, which is a Disney show that's just recently opened up here. So yeah, today I thought I'd maybe talk through the gear I'm using, so the bass guitar, the double bass and the pedals and the microphones, all that kind of stuff. But to start with, I thought it might be quite a good idea to talk about, the gig itself and how it differs from Hamilton, which I just did for many years over in Victoria. So with Hamilton, for example, it was more of a hip hop musical. So with that, there's lots of track and lots of click. So we'd watch the MD for a count-in for a song. But once it kicked off, basically we'd be like, head down, I'll see you at the end, because it's all on click and there's not much to sort of concentrate on in that respect. But with a musical like this, it's a little bit more traditionally musical theatre in places. So by that, what I mean is you'd have more what we call orchestral time. Sometimes they describe it as being on the stick. So instead of having like a musical director who's actually playing keyboards, that we would call a keys MD, this is actually just a conductor, so just a man who's standing up there and just conducting us. So yeah, what I would say about a show like this is you've got to remember that they're telling a story on the stage, and that's happening not just in between the songs, but actually through the songs themselves. So it's not just quite as simple as just head down playing a song. Sometimes the song will kind of ebb and flow. There might be sections of a song that suddenly move forward and the tempo goes forward a little bit. And suddenly there might be a few moments where it sits back a bit. So the MD is kind of, or the conductor in this case, is kind of, directing us from what he's seeing on the stage, and he's kind of trying to be that link between what's happening on the stage and what's happening in the pit. So this is quite a kind of a shorter show than Hamilton, but it's quite intense, and we've got to be kind of, wits about us at all times, and really keeping an eye on what the conductor's showing us. So you'll notice throughout the music, there's quite a lot of stuff where suddenly I'm really keeping my eye on the screen here to see what the MD's doing. And I'll be following like a hawk, really, in terms of what the time's doing. So, like I say, sometimes a bar will move really fast and there'll be another bar that pulls up. So I've really got to have my wits about me on that, that respect. So it's a great gig. I mean, not only is it just that sort of musical theatre stuff, but then it will suddenly switch to the gospel numbers, which are really enjoyable, really my kind of bag. The reason I'm here actually is because the musical supervisor is a guy called Michael Kazarin from over in America. I worked with him about 15 years ago on Sister Act, and I think he enjoyed my playing on that show, and I brought a little something to it. So he thought of me for this, so that's why I'm sat here today. So I'm really pleased to have been asked. And yeah, the gospel numbers are, pretty full on, and very kind of 5-string bass is quite low on a lot of the stuff. So it's great to have the 5-string here. So yeah, with that, maybe I should start talking about the equipment itself. I've got my, my trusty Overwater 5-string, which I've had for many years, and I've talked about this before, so there's nothing new in terms of what the instrument is. But one thing I thought I haven't done is I haven't actually talked about the actual settings. Like, I've done a few of these videos before, and people often ask me about the exact settings I'm using. And one thing I thought would be quite cool to talk about is this Uni-Pre. So I've got this preamp in the bass, which is called a Uni-Pre by John East. What's interesting about it is, some bass preamps, you can choose the bass frequency and the treble frequency that you want to adjust. But with this one, you can go even further than that. So you can choose, you basically choose what you call a bass window. So what you do is you choose a frequency which is going to be the bottom of your bass control, and you choose another frequency will be the upper reaches of what your bass control does. And that window is the actual the frequency band that you'll be adjusting up and down by boosting or cutting. So that's quite interesting, because you can choose like a narrow band if you want a specific frequency to be boosted, or you can go a bit wider if you want it to have a more of a general effect, like especially on that low end area. So I actually got I spoke to John himself, and he sent me a little diagram of what the frequencies are on the dials inside at the back of the preamp here. So what I've done is I've set my bass window to be the lower area to be about 31 Hertz, which is the kind of the B string kind of area. 31 Hertz is that kind of B string frequency. And then the upper regions I've chosen about 110 Hertz, which, so that's quite a wide window, but it gives a real kind of a real heft to that fifth string, especially on a show like this. And interestingly, the treble frequency, you can just choose a single frequency for that. I went for 2 kilohertz. So that might actually sound quite low when we think about, bass, middle and treble. 2 sounds quite low. It almost sounds like upper mid. But actually, I find personally that's more of a kind of the punchy range of the treble. Like if you go up to sort of 10K, you start to just get loads of fret noise, and it sounds kind of glassy and clanky. And it's not really helping much for what I want to do. In fact, I'd probably want to start rolling off at 10. So 2 kilohertz is a really nice sort of punchy treble frequency for me, and it works particularly well with these Bartolini pickups which I've got on the bass. And interestingly, I remember looking into the preamp that Marcus Miller had put into his jazz bass, the sort of famous Sadowski one that you hear about. And it's interesting to know that the treble frequency there is actually 1.5 kilohertz. So it's very low, but it's probably quite a wide band that it's covering. It probably covers lots of frequencies either side. So that's just something I thought I'd say about this preamp. It's very versatile. And I remember when I first bought it, I kind of figured, I thought to myself, I probably won't do all this adjusting stuff inside. But I'm glad I did, because I kind of worked on it and I got a really nice sound that I'm particularly happy with. Okay, so that brings me on to where this bass is being plugged into. I tried one or two different pedals actually, and I had one in here for a while, which I'll leave nameless because I don't want to, I don't want to slag off gear that I'm not using. But I basically, after a while, I had to bring in my my Caveman preamp, which is this BP1 compact, which is an absolutely fantastic piece of kit. And I guess it's the kind of, the problem with sitting on a residency for any length of time is that you kind of sit here and you can't help but fiddle with the gear and mess about and start tweaking things, and I sort of started to hear the issues with the other piece of kit, which I've decided against using. And what I love about the Caveman in particular, it's got very minimal controls, but when you've got a bass like this with lots of EQ on it, you don't always need to double up on your EQ. So it's essentially just a gain and an overall volume. The more gain you use, the more it kind of starts to saturate the sound a little bit. But I tend to keep it, fairly clean. But what I've noticed about that particular pedal is it seems to have an enormous frequency response. It was almost like the pedal I was using before. The frequency response almost sort of rolled off underneath the fourth string, and it almost sounded a bit quieter on that B string. But the Caveman here has just got the most unbelievable bottom end to it. It really reproduces that fifth string, in such a great way. So I love the fact that it just sounds hefty and huge. And it also seems to kind of respond almost like I'm playing through a really decent amp, with like, a big 15-inch speaker or something. It just has this kind of weight to it, and it has a responsiveness. So it's got like that headroom. We always hear the words headroom, don't we, in equipment, and it will, you kind of think, well, what do you mean by headroom? But it's that feeling of when you dig in, the gear responds and it has somewhere to go. So that pedal in particular just is pivotal to my sound these days. I just love it, and I'm going to end up with more than one of those pedals because they're so blooming good, Okay, so let's move on to the double bass side of things. Now I've got my EBS Stanley Clark preamp again, and I did use one of those preamps on the electric basses when I was in Hamilton, but for Hercules I've decided to use it for the double bass. It's a great preamp actually. I really love the fact that it's got two channels which have got all the same controls, so it kind of keeps it quite simple in that respect. I've got my bass balsarite pickup on the bridge, and we've also got a mic here called a DPA mic, which is a clip-on mic, and that's called a 4099 mic, which is a kind of industry standard clip-on mic, and it kind of gets out of the way under the bridge, and that works really well. Now another great thing about this preamp, especially with acoustic instruments like double basses, is obviously I've talked about these two channels. Now there's different ways that you can plug into these two channels. So you can plug in with jacks to both A and B, but B you can also use a microphone. So what you can do is you can actually plug into channel A. You could have your pickup. I've got this, like I say, the bass balsarite pickup there. That's this kind of pin one here, and then you can actually plug a microphone into the second channel and then blend the two. Now, before I arrived here, I thought it might be quite cool to just do a bit of a comparison in maybe a more controlled setting. So when I was back at home, I did 3 little bits of recording, and what I've done is the first one is just the pickup on its own. So let's have a quick look what that sounds like. so that sounded fine. But I thought I'd do the same thing again, but this time I played the same piece of music from Fraser, and just this time just have just the DPA mic. So let's have a little listen to what that sounds like. Okay, so I don't know about you, but I thought that sounded a lot better. The microphone it just picks up a lot more. It sort of feels a lot more natural. You get the sound of the strings, you know, the fact it's an acoustic instrument, and you know, yes, we get a little bit more of the room, but it just sounds a lot more real. So, you know, I love the sound of that DPA mic. But the beauty of this preamp is that you can mix the sound of a pickup and a mic together. So for this last recording, I did just that, 50-50 split of the two. So let's have a little listen to that. Cool. So yeah, that's a mix of the two. I mean, if I'm honest, I think my actual favourite is just the DPA mic. It sounds, you know, just like I say, the most natural. But you know, you're always fighting that battle of trying to pick up your instrument but not pick up the rest of the band. So sometimes it's sort of about finding that nice balance, you know, and maybe a bit of pickup with that microphone gives the best of both worlds. So yeah, interestingly, I'd probably, if I had, you know, if there was no one else here, I would just have the DPA mic, but in a band setting, I'd probably go for that mix. So yeah, I thought today maybe I'd talk a little bit more about the controls themselves and the settings. For example, with this one, you've got your usual gain control, just to set a sturdy kind of gain going into the pedal. And then you've got your normal EQ, you've got a bass, you've got mid with mid-frequency controls, and you've got what we call what they've called a filter control, so we'll get onto that in a minute, and then a treble. Now, the bass control itself is fairly self-explanatory. It's a 40 hertz, and I think it's just a fixed frequency, and it does what it says on the tin. Now, the mid-range is actually what we call semi-parametric. Now, you often hear semi-parametric and you hear fully parametric, so I thought I'd maybe just talk about that a bit today. The whole, you know, terms of parametric EQ, what you're kind of talking about is, rather than having you know, a manufacturer decide a frequency for you and you can choose to boost or cut it, the idea is you've got more flexibility. So you can essentially, you can choose what frequency you want to boost or cut. Now, if you've just got that amount of controls, that's called semi-parametric. So what we're doing is we're going to choose a frequency that we want to adjust, and then we can adjust it up or down. Now, when you go to fully parametric, you can actually adjust how many of the frequencies either side of that chosen frequency also get adjusted. So, and they call that the Q. So if you've got a narrow cue, what's happening is you've chosen a frequency and you're only adjusting that frequency and a few frequencies either side of it, like that. You almost have like a steep little curve like that. If you go for a wide cue, it affects more of the frequencies either side. So that would be if you've got fully parametric. So semi-parametric, they probably choose how wide they want that to be, and that's a fixed thing, but you're going to choose the frequency itself and whether you boost or cut it. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because we have a filter here, and you can choose what's called a notch filter. Now, a notch filter, what that means is if you go ultra kind of tight with the cue, so you just go as tight as possible with the frequencies that you've chosen either side. You've chosen a frequency and it's how many frequencies either side of that chosen frequency are being adjusted. If you go very, very narrow, that's great for cutting a problematic sort of feeding back frequency. Often you get on a stage with a double bass and there'll be one specific frequency that just seems to get affected by the room or the speakers, and that will feed back. So what's great about a notch filter is it's almost like you've got a fully parametric EQ and you've decided to go for the tightest possible cue that you can have, and you've decided to cut just that frequency. And where that comes into its own is that it can adjust, it can get rid of that feedback, but it won't seem like it's affected the sound too much. It's such a tight frequency that you've decided to get rid of that it doesn't seem to affect the rest of the sound of the bass, which is really great for getting rid of feedback on a stage. The other way you could use that filter control is you could just do it as a high-pass filter. So what that will do is essentially kind of just get rid of any frequencies below a chosen frequency. So that's quite good for rumble on a double bass. Sometimes you have mics and pickups on these things and you get this really kind of subterranean rumble, which isn't really much use to anyone. So it's quite nice to be able to just get rid of that. So that control itself, you can either use it as a notch filter for feedback or a high-pass filter. So that's a very useful control to have. But also here I've got a really beautiful sounding Neumann mic that's in front of me here, and that's called a TLM 103, and I think it's pushing £1,000 for a mic like that. And actually in the past, when I did Hamilton, I actually kept most of my sound coming from the pickup in terms of my own mix in the pit, because it sort of keeps it very close mic sound and it doesn't pick up the rest of the room. But for this one, I just looking at this Neumann mic here, and I just thought that's such a nice sounding mic, especially for Arco, that I wanted to try and get a bit more of that in my bass mix here. So I got the sound people to buy one of those little baffles that you have for vocal mics. And we've put that around it, and I've even made a little lid for it, so it keeps it just picking up the sound of my bass here. And I really enjoy especially the Arco sound that you get off that microphone itself. So yeah, essentially I've got a more of a broad mix these days, maybe half of the pickup and the other half being the two microphones I've got on here. And I have to be a bit careful with not picking up too much of the room, and there's lots of brass and stuff here. But it seems to be working quite well with this baffle around the mic. And yeah, I'm quite enjoying the sound I'm getting from the double bass, which is cool. Okay, so that's the sort of the two instruments I'm using. Now, when you look at the actual pedal board itself, you'll notice that I've only really got the two preamps themselves and a couple of tuners. I've got an always-on Boss TU3S for the double bass and a little TC Electronic Polytune 3 Mini I've got in there, which all fits nicely on the board. One of the things that I found when I put one of my videos up before is quite a few bass players got in touch and they were asking about the fact that I don't use a compressor on the board. And it's a fair question, actually. It's come up quite a few times. Personally, like I talked about that whole thing of like following the conductor and trying to be quite dynamic in this sort of environment. I like to be able to have full control of my volume, and I do that with my fingers, really. I'm playing quietly in some moments and I'm really digging in other moments. But it did sort of strike me that that's not the end of the chain. This sound comes out of my board and it goes elsewhere. So I took a few moments to catch up with Adam Fisher, who's the sound designer for the show. And he was kind enough to chat with me for a few minutes. So let's have a little look what he had to say. Okay, so when I was thinking about doing a rig roundup for this show, it struck me that often we talk about our immediate area on stage, whether it be our bass guitar and backline, or maybe a bass guitar and our pedal boards and things like that. But it struck me that's not the end of the signal chain, is it? Once it comes out of the DI, it goes elsewhere. So I thought that's where this man comes in. So this is Adam Fisher, who's the sound designer for Hercules. And what this man doesn't know about sound isn't worth knowing. He's done so much work. His CV is extensive. So thanks so much for giving us your time today. And just so you know, a sound designer is basically someone who will design from the ground up the entire sound system for a show. So from the desks and the outboard gear through to the line array PA systems and our monitoring in the pit. So it's a very important job. And I thought maybe I'd just talk to you today maybe a little bit about a couple of things that us bass player geeks always talk about. Is one of the first things is like compression, for example. Like a lot of players say to me, why haven't you got a compressor in the pit? And personally, I like to kind of keep things as dynamic as possible. Like there'll be moments where I have to play very quietly, and other times when I have to really lay into it. And with a compressor, it's not just taking the peaks off, is it? You kind of bring squash things, but you bring it all up. So all the little things will come up. Yeah. So I tend to shy away from that for this sort of work. Yeah. But it did strike me, when it goes elsewhere into your hands, it's going to get compressed. So I just wondered kind of what you do, especially the electric bass, really. What I guess the biggest thing with musical theatre is, as you say, is keeping the dynamic. Yeah.
And for us, it's kind of keeping the transients that you play there, but fitting you within a mix. So generally what I do is have a clean channel that is you, raw, whatever you do, and a compressed channel.
I see.
So a kind of a term of parallel and compression to be able to kind of keep that lower stuff up, and also even out those tones, especially you going from your kind of the lowest of the low to the highest. Yeah. You don't normally sometimes get an even kind of distribution level wise, so it's kind of good to have that foundation. So we kind of, I say that the clean channel that you have still has a bit of compression,
a little bit,
but it's a very
more
different,
the limiter,
a very different kind of. But you kind of, I guess, from a bass player perspective, you would have a compressor to even out your.
That's sort of generally what they do, sometimes you can use them at the beginning of a signal chain to like maybe get an octaver to work really well or something like that, because it can kind of bring everything up, but it's funny that you should say the two channels, because on some of the newer pedals they have like a parallel thing, so you can have some that's it, the original sound and the compressed sound.
I mean, I think on this actually I use two different kinds of compressor. One that's more of an optical based one that has a slow attack, so it doesn't take away your transients.
I see.
And kind of keeps that kind of tone. And then on the compressed channel is more of a kind of heavy attack.
Right, I see.
And we'll
get
kind
a bit more punchy.
Yeah.
Right.
And then because of the different styles of music in the show, you kind of have to have those many different.
Because there is some really quiet, really tiny bass moments where it's just a bit of vocals and you feel like you've really got to back off, and other moments where it's like the gospel-y numbers and you've got to really lay into it.
Yeah, it's kind of that musical theatre songs versus the kind of gospel-y pop.
That's it, isn't it?
Sort of thing going on.
And would you compress the double bass much?
Yeah, so actually with the double bass we've got a 4099 close mic.
Oh, that's right. Cool.
Yeah, a Neumann mic that's kind of more of a rounded tone, which can only get used in certain places. And then your DI, we're split again. We have your DI as it is, and then a compressed version of the DI.
Right.
Then we feature different things depending on whether you're playing Arco or whether you're playing bits.
Yeah, because it can really stand. Like the Arco can be louder, can't it? You know.
So it's kind of.
And I guess, and also like the mix, for example. I often talk in my last video I did about this kind of stuff. I talked about the fact that in my monitoring, I'll have like 75% of the sound will be kind of my pickup because it doesn't pick up the room and all the trumpets and all that stuff, and the rest of it will be like the DPA mic. But I'm guessing out the front, you probably have less of my pickup.
Yes.
Going out front, and you'd probably go more for the regular.
And
mics,
then also we send certain things to you pre our processing, so you don't get as much compression.
Right.
You don't get the compressed channel because I think that would end up being a bit annoying. Some people have different preferences, like you.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I like to have it just like what I'm doing.
What you're doing,
and especially like things like I like to try and get an even tone with my fingers these days. It's like, you know, really, I think we've got a responsibility at our end as well to give you an even performance. Not you know, we can't just be laying into it and just being really messy because you're like, how do I deal with this? You know? So I try and have it like as raw as hell in the pit, so I can sort of concentrate on my performance and making it as kind of controlled as possible.
And also then for us to give to you that performance, which we may EQ stuff out here to fit you within the mix of like frequently getting that competition between a bass and a kick drum and making that kind of work together. Sometimes wouldn't make what you feel you need to have to perform.
Yeah, that's it. Because actually it's funny you should mention that, because one of the things I always, a bit of a bugbear of mine is that like lots of bass equipment, whether it be an amplifier or a pedal, they have like a quick button, a preset EQ button, which is also always a smiley face. It's like a little bit bass, scooped, get rid of the middle, and that's supposed to be good. But for me, it makes my blood boil, because it's like how to not cut through in a mix is to remove all your mid-range. For me, the lower mids in particular are where it's at. And I just wondered, is that the sort of thing you would push out here if you're EQing the bass?
You kind of get those moments where you can kind of, and that's also tailoring the EQ on those two channels.
Of course,
is one does kind of the whole body of the thing, and one maybe pushes a bit of the kind of mid-range, higher mids, so you can get that real.
It's great. You have that ability with more than one channel. You can go, I'll do a bit of that with that one.
And on a song-by-song, cue-by-cue basis, we can kind of change it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you have cues all the time. It seems to change a lot, doesn't it? So there's a hell of a lot going on.
But then it's making sure that you kind of have a consistent, and you do what you do, and then we can kind of tailor it.
Right. Yeah. Well, it sounds, it all sounds good. I've been hearing great things about how it sounds out front. And I suppose just to finish a little bit, I thought one of the things is interesting as us bass players, we don't tend to have amps anymore. In the olden days, we'd have an amp in the pit. And I remember a guy called Jazz Lockery, a friend of mine who played in Mamma Mia.
I worked with Jazz on Mamma Mia.
Oh, that's right, And also he went on to Billy Elliot, and he famously, I think he got told, you can't have an amp in this pit. So he brought in a 410 cab the next day, which was quite fun, which did make me laugh. But anyway, my point being is that we don't really have amps in the pits anymore. They call it a silent pit these days. But I kind of wondered what the drivers are out the front. What's my bass going through out the front?
So your bass is going through, the subs main down here are two 21-inch subs that are made by man. A single huge driver. Wow, but then the line array have double 12s, I think.
Oh, okay.
So they kick out a lot of low end. So yeah.
Because I think in the olden days you'd get a big bass stack. I think the biggest speaker you could get would be an 18.
Yeah.
You could get an 18 and a 410.
So this is a 21s. And then on the truss, which you can't see from here, a 6 18-inch.
Oh, there we go.
So
quite something.
Yeah. So there's a lot of power there if we need it. But
I need to get out front and have a listen one day.
Yeah. Certainly for those gospel numbers.
Absolutely. But you can really
feel it.
Absolutely. Oh, nice one. Well, that's so kind of you to spend a bit of time with me today. And thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Speak to you soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. So very nice to chat to Adam there. Good of him to give up a bit of time and share some of his expertise in this thing. And one thing I found, a couple of things I found really interesting about what he said there. The whole thing of splitting my signal and creating, a couple of channels for the bass and a couple of channels for the double bass. What's interesting about that is he's trying to keep the dynamics going out the front as well. So he wants, that sense of quiet moving up to loud for various different moments in the show. He wants to reproduce that, but there still needs to be like a bedrock of sound that's always there. So by having a heavily compressed channel, that he'll be able to set a kind of a bedrock of bass that's always there out front, and then the channel without the compression on it will have a bit more dynamics to it, so that will get louder and quieter with that, as I play different songs. But the compressed channel will always kind of keep, like I say, a base level of volume that's always there. And what's interesting about that is that you see all these companies these days making really fantastic compressor pedals, and you can see where they've got this idea of parallel compression from. They've taken it from the pros here, where you can kind of have that punchy sound from a compressor, but you've also got a bit of breathability, for want of a better word. Your instrument can still sound like it can breathe a bit, and you can kind of increase the volume yourself by digging in more. You don't want that just completely squashed sound all the time, or you don't want to feel that when you start to lay into the instrument that it doesn't respond. So that's something I've always been a bit wary of with compressors, is that they start to limit my dynamics. So it's interesting to hear what he does with it out front, and it obviously creates an incredible sound. And the other thing I found quite interesting was just to hear about these 20-inch subs out the front. So I'd like to get out the front one day and have a little listen, see what it sounds like. Okay, so essentially that's my setup here at Hercules the Musical. As before, if there's any questions you've got about the setup here, there'll be probably, multiple things that I've forgotten to talk about. So I'm always happy to answer your questions. So feel free to ask away in the comments here under the video, and I'll do my best to get back to you. But for now, yeah, I hope you've enjoyed having a little look through this setup here for Disney's Hercules. And I'll probably see you again quite soon. I've just been booked for another show, which is next year, which I'm hoping will be the greatest. So I'll see you soon.